I just want to share a few things. It's more thoughts on the cross. It's not something that we don't know. I think it's something that we all have read. Mark chapter 15. Mark chapter 15. It's basically the passage of what happened during the crucifixion. Mark 15 and verses 21 onwards. Mark 15, 21 onwards. It says, a passerby named Simon, who was from Cyrene, was coming in from the countryside just then. And the soldiers forced him to carry Jesus' cross. Simon was the father of Alexander and Rufus. And they brought Jesus to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. They offered him wine drugged with myrrh, but he refused it. Then the soldiers nailed him to the cross. They divided his clothes and they threw dice to decide who would get each piece. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. A sign announced the charge against him. It read, "The King of the Jews." 2 revolutionaries were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. The people passing by shouted abuse, shaking their heads in mockery. "Ha! Look at you now," they yelled at him. "You said you were going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Well then, save yourself and come down from the cross." The leading priests and teachers of religious law also mocked Jesus. "He saved others," they scoffed, "but he can't save himself. Let this Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross so we can see it and believe him." Even the men who were crucified with Jesus ridiculed him. Well, I was thinking about this guy, Simon from Cyrene. Probably they took him by surprise. The guy was coming from some countryside, probably coming to visit his family or coming back home and passing by, they just caught the guy. They didn't give him an option. They didn't say, "Do you want to carry the cross?" They're like, "Hey, catch that guy, bring him here, carry the cross." I think Simon is the most privileged guy on earth. He actually felt part of the pain of Jesus. Did you know that cross was not a joke? That's solid wood to carry. And remember, he was not fresh out of the gym. Jesus never went to the gym and pumped some weights and came and said, "Okay, give me that log. I'm ready for the cross right now." It says he was beaten. He was tortured. Half his life was already gone while they tortured him. And the remaining half, he was trying to carry this cross, and he probably fell down a couple of times. And probably he had no strength for the cross. They caught Simon. You see, I think Simon probably was wondering, "Man, what is this?" But it never says that Simon actually rejected or refused or, he immediately yielded. I think Simon was one of the most fortunate guys to partner with Jesus to Calvary. And this morning I was thinking about Simon. I was thinking, how many of us are willing to understand that pain of that cross and willing to get a taste of the cross? In some countries on this day, people actually carry the cross and walk on the road. Even in India, some of them do it. I've heard people, they actually go and get a cross, and they, just to feel the pain that Jesus felt, they actually would carry it and walk on the road demonstrating. They do it. People do it. I think if I'm not making a mistake, some people also try to hang themselves on the cross and see the pain. Now, it's not a bad idea to do that. It's not necessary to do that. But on the other front, I think it's not a bad idea to do that, because when we actually get to understand a little bit of the suffering and pain, we get to understand the other part of it. And Simon was one of those guys where he actually was so privileged. It says from the countryside just then, and the soldiers forced him to carry Jesus' cross. Simon was the father of Alexander and Rufus. And they brought Jesus to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. They offered him wine drugged with myrrh, but he refused it. I don't know why they they put myrrh in the wine and drugged him. I don't know, probably to get him out of the pain and I don't know what. But he says he refused it. And the soldiers nailed him to the cross. And you know, I was thinking about nailing him to the cross. And you know, and that's why this morning when I prayed, I said, it was not the nails that kept Jesus on the cross, it was the love. It was not the nails, it was the love. The love was beyond the nails. The love was beyond the pain. And it says they nailed him to the cross, and that nailing to the cross was his love for us in our lives. They divided his clothes and threw dice to decide who would get each piece. I was wondering, why would they take his clothes? He's not some movie star and rock star and, you know, cine artist for them to go back and say, hey, you know, we got, you know, Shah Rukh Khan's shirt today. You know, we got, you know, Dimple Kapadia's pants today or whatever. He's not a big artist. Why would they throw dice and, you know, want to tear his pieces? And I don't know, it's thing. But when I was thinking about them tearing his clothes, listen to me. First of all, the guy is going through pain, turmoil. And now he's going through shame. Would you like someone to hold you on the road and tear your clothes? Just think about it. Forget about them beating you and asking you to carry the cross and forget all that. They just catch you and tear your clothes. Do you think it's a very nice thing to have on the road? So the first was the nail-pierced hands and the nails was his love towards us. Absolute, unconditional, amazing, reckless love. And when the soldiers took his clothes and tore it, he was probably only with a loin around his private part. Some piece of cloth just covering his private part. That was shame. He was going through shame, stripped shame, nakedness with pain and agony. How much of that shame do we understand in our lives? I know some people, if you go and just touch their hair like this, they get so angry. Don't touch my hair, you're spoiling my hairstyle, they'll say. What if they just take away your clothes and tear your clothes? How shameful is that? The love of Jesus through the nails was the first. As they tore his clothes, his shame was for us, so that we don't have to tear our clothes. We don't have to go through that shame that he went through. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. A sign announced the charges against him. You know, if at all there should be any charges, it should be people who have been doing wrong things. I don't think if anybody had an opportunity, they would have been able to even pinpoint one wrong thing that Jesus did. And when it says there was a sign of his charges, what were those charges? What do you think Jesus actually, what wrong did Jesus did? Healing the sick, was that wrong? Raising the dead, was that wrong? Forgiving people's sin, was that wrong? You see, today's scenario, at least in our country, you can go and murder someone and get back home and eat biryani. There's no charge against you. You can go and rape someone and go back home and go back again and rape another person and go back home and there's no charge against you. Today, if a girl or a woman gets raped and she goes to the police station, they'll say, you can't file an FIR. You dressed inappropriately. That's why they came and did that to you. These are actually places where you're supposed to charge people, put them in jail, punish them. What was the charges against Jesus? What wrong did, what offense did he commit? I'm trying to understand, what was those charges like? You know, I imagine if I was there, I would probably just ask them, can you please at least mention 3 charges? I want to hear the charges. You see, nobody had the guts to even ask them, what were the charges? What did this man do? Everybody was quiet. They charged, there was charges against him. It read, the King of the Jews. There were 2 revolutionaries who were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. The people passing by shouted abuses, shaking their heads in mockery. Ha! Look at you now, they yelled at him. You said you were going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Well then save yourself and come down from the cross. You see, Jesus was always talking in parables. He was always talking about the kingdom of God. He was always trying to help people understand and explain things. But in my understanding, most of the people, sometimes including the disciples, never understand any of his parables. They never got it. Jesus was trying to tell a story and say, this is how the kingdom of God would be. When Jesus looked at the temple, the disciples, they were walking one day and they said, look at these magnificent structures, Jesus. And Jesus said, hey, don't worry about all this. All this is going to be broken and in 3 days I'll bring it back. They probably would have been thinking, which JCB is available here that this guy will do all these things now. How many JCBs can he bring and come and break this whole thing down? And it took years to build this temple. What is this guy talking about? You see, when God speaks something to you, think with God. God's speaking from the kingdom perspective. Don't think from an earthly perspective. When you go, let's say if the Prime Minister or the King invites you for lunch. Listen to me carefully. If the Prime Minister or King or some big person invites you to their home or their office for lunch, first of all, the question is, how will you go dressed? Will you go dressed up like their status, or you will go dressed up like your status? Question number one. Question number two, how would you talk to them when you're there? Would you talk locally like you talk to your friends in the village, or you will talk on their level? How will you behave at the dining table with them? Would you behave the way you eat in your house near the kitchen, or would you behave with respect and the way they would respect and behave? You see, if there's someone big and prominent invites us for lunch or dinner, we get to behave like them. We identify with them. When God talks to you from the kingdom's perspective, don't behave like you. Behave like Him. Understand like Him. Try to understand what is He trying. What's that phrase and terminology Jesus said? Don't be literally calculating, that building, how many JCBs will we have? No, that's stupid. You lost it. You've lost the whole conversation with Jesus. That's the reason why when God tells us to do something, we're not able to do it, because we're not thinking like Him. We're thinking like the local church. If you think like the local church, you will be local and you'll die local. When God speaks to you, think like God. Respond like God. Comprehend like God. Try to get to that level of God. Because when the Prime Minister invites you, you're always trying to identify like the Prime Minister. If you go to a party, if you go to a club, how will you dress? And how will you behave when you go there?